Listening to Cultural Brilliance Radio, the DNA of Organizational Excellence with Claudette Rowley. I'm Dr. Pat. I get to have these conversations with Claudette each and every time. I'm really excited to be talking with her and having conversations that actually matter. Real talk for real change is what we're talking about today. And as we said before, today is the launch. You want to find out what's being launched by Claudette? Go to culturalbrilliance.com. Lots more to come about that. What a great topic for today. And I know we're going to talk about ways to change the conversation in organization. I don't know that an organization these days, Claudette, can really afford not to change the conversation. I mean, I'd love to hear what you think about that and how now you're being asked to come into organizations to help with this.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think organizations can afford to not address this either because it really costs them so much. It could be cost them on their bottom line, right? Dollars and cents, certainly lost talent, people walking out the door, knowledge walking out the door, and all of that eventually boils down to money. And then we also have this, the simple fact too of how do we want to treat people in organizations? Do we want to treat them with respect? Do we want to have really important conversations in ways that are respectful and honoring of each other? Absolutely.
How do we do this? What are some of the ways to change?
Well, some of the things we've been talking in bits and pieces throughout the whole show about this and pulling it together. There are really three things that are coming to mind for me. One is the listening that we've talked about. And sometimes people will say to me, my organizational culture is so dysfunctional. This is so entrenched in certain ways, and I don't know how I can, as one person, make a difference. So the first two tips I'm going to share really are ways that no matter what kind of culture you have or where you are in the organization, you can really use these. And one is to become an absolutely great listener. You could try to decode your culture by listening. You could become a great listener in a meeting. Someone that you maybe, I'm going to make this up, you have a manager that you really don't like or someone you always butt heads with. Maybe you change your perspective and just simply listen in a neutral way to them and see what happens. See what happens. How does it change you? Because sometimes what a lot of the research on conflict resolution talks about is that in many cases, we only need to change ourselves, and then the conflict itself will start shifting and changing in positive ways. So we have a lot of power in changing how the stance we're adopting, the mindset we have, how we're listening, the quality of that. So that's huge.
What are some of the obstacles? And usually we use language like resistance, stuckness. I mean, there's just a lot of words to describe what happens when here we are and we're talking about these things that someone can do, an organization can do, and we run into the situation where even after sharing, these are the things you can do, it just doesn't happen. How do you help define what these barriers are? Maybe we can talk about that a little bit.
It's more, the barriers are typically there, and most people will know what the barriers are. So when people are looking at that, or they'll bring up, Claudette, there's just so many barriers. I typically come back to listening. I'll also come back to the second tip I wanted to share, which is get really curious. Get really curious. And a perspective of curiosity is much more powerful than it might sound. Here's why. If you think about it, our brains cannot hold curiosity and judgment simultaneously. So if I'm really curious, even if I don't personally like someone, right? If I just get really curious about them and I listen to them and I ask them some good questions and I'm just curious about where they're coming from. Like, why is this important to them? What would they like to see happen next? Is there any way that I could be helpful to them? Anything like that. And I listen to them and I'm really curious. I can't judge them in that particular moment. And it makes my mind open way up from adopting a perspective of curiosity. And I start to understand too. So it's not just a nice thing to do. It's actually a really practical thing to do because I start to understand then what's important to this other person. And maybe I've been making assumptions about them. What's some pain that they might be having? What's going well for them? What can I learn from them? What can I learn about them? It's a really, and you can do that in a meeting. I mean, there are lots of easy ways you can fold that into your day.
Wow. I think that we're talking about something so important right now because you're right. I mean, we're emailing each other, we're texting each other, and you and I actually experienced this, right?
Yeah.
As we were doing the website, and I would be typing a little note to you, and then you'd be typing it back, and then and then I would say, "Okay, I'm not sure I understand." And then we would pick up the phone and actually call, and I'd find that, yeah, I didn't understand. Um, but it's so simple to do that if we can put aside all of these things that might come up. Are you going to think I'm smart enough? Are you going to think, you know what I mean? When
Mhm.
we bring those things into the game, it really does become difficult for people to show up as their best. And
Mhm.
isn't that what we're attempting to do here?
Yeah, is at people showing up at their best, and I think part of that too is having a general perspective that most people are fairly well intentioned.
Hmm.
So, of course, we all know there are exceptions to that. But generally speaking, that most people are fairly well intentioned. So, if one starts thinking, am I smart enough? What is he or she thinking of me and all that? Maybe putting that aside and just think, you know what? We're two people communicating and we have different styles. And so, if it gets confusing or frustrating, we'll just pick up the phone and leave it there, right? Without all the other thoughts. And the perspective of curiosity can help. I think can
Yeah.
help you stay there in a more neutral place. Help one stay there in a more neutral place.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And have some humor about it too. Humor can help, playfulness can help. Making a joke out of it as long as it's, someone's, open to humor at a particular time.
Yeah.
For a lot of people that works. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And for people where they don't think it works, it actually does work.
Yeah, most of the time.
It does. Now, you work with individuals as well as working with teams. Is there a difference in how you go about this, or are sort of the parameters pretty much the same, except that you might go about it differently? How does that work for you?
Yeah, it's fairly similar. Or if I'm working with the team, could be teaching them skills. Maybe we're doing team development. Maybe they're the leadership team in an organization that's working on their culture, whatever it might be. It's interesting. You have to work with the team itself, so they are a good working entity, and then you still have to start working with how the team is interacting with other teams or other departments within the organization. But a lot of the same basic premises apply. What I'm working with an individual on, a lot of times I'm just working with 8 individuals on, right? Or looking at them as in a system, an entity that works together. So it just adds more nuance to it and more layers, but it's pretty similar.
Oh, yeah. What a great show. First of all, congratulations
Thank you.
on the work that you do, and congratulations on bringing cultural brilliance to the forefront. And I know we're going to be sharing much, much more about it. I wanted to ask you this in the couple of minutes we have left. You know, After today's show and after launching this, I'm sure that this has been an interesting journey. I'd love to know what your personal message is for everyone listening to this. That has an idea that they'd like to launch, and then also about today's conversation about conversations.
Yeah. Well, to the first one, I mean, it is like you said, it's been a journey, but it's been very exciting and exhilarating. And when you're putting something out to the world that you're passionate about, and you know, you're passionate about it because you feel like you have something to contribute to it, that really makes all the difference. And then having a great team around you, like Dr. Pat's been an awesome team member for me. Having a great team you're working with also makes all the difference because you can't really do it all alone.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the second piece to it in terms of, the message today for the show is that you can't, I may have said this earlier, but you cannot change what you cannot talk about. And I bring that up because I see in organizations literally
Mm.
all the time. We're going to try to change this, but we're not talking about it with the right people. And that could be a whole show in and of itself, but you cannot
I think
change, you
so.
cannot talk about.
Yep.
So if you're thinking we want to change this, but we can't talk about it, I encourage anyone thinking that to actually rethink that. Okay, we will need to talk about it. How can we talk about it? And who needs to be part of
Awesome.
that conversation?
I love it. Okay, I think we have it. I think we're just building these show topics out. Claudette Rowley, everyone. For those of you out there, check it out. culturalbrilliance.com. And remember, we've got lots more to come. Please make sure you contact Claudette. Even if you're not exactly sure what she can do to help you, she will help you get some clarity about that. Stay tuned, everyone. More coming up on Transformation Talk Radio.
You've been listening to the hit show Cultural Brilliance Radio, the DNA of organizational excellence with Claudette Rowley. Conversations that are transforming the world of culture and business. You can download this podcast and find out more about Claudette and her breakthrough work at ClaudetteRowley.com. Please contact Claudette and find out how you can create a brilliant culture.